What is the worst secondhand embarrassment you've ever felt? Story 1. How'd a guy walk into class in college late? It was auditorium seating, and the only open spaces were on the 4th row in the middle, about 25 rows in total, and about 50 seats per row. This guy walks in and sits down 15 minutes into the lecture and opens his laptop, which as soon as the lights boot up starts blaring adult videos and in the build-up to the big finale to boot. He couldn't log in fast enough or mute it since he wasn't logged in, so he slammed it shut, put it in his bag, and walked out with it still blaring at full volume. We heard it finally stop as he was about to leave the building. Man, it's one thing to be late to class, it's one thing to accidentally blare adult videos in class, but holy crap, to combine them? I assume he dropped out, changed his name, and moved to a different school in a different state. Lecture hall embarrassment is the worst. I was in a huge lecture hall, the biggest one on our campus. We had a 500-person class. We were taking a final exam. I finished at the halfway point, so about 200 people had already left, so it wasn't everyone. Anyway, I was going down the stairs to hand in my exam and tripped and fell down like 6 steps. The worst part? I was carrying a can of Coke, which I dropped and spilled all down the steps. It's been about 10 years and I haven't thought about that in a while, but this post reminded me. Thanks. One time I didn't close out of adult videos on my iPhone and took an Uber ride home. I had a female driver that was roughly my age or a bit younger. I went to go search for something on my phone, and right when I loaded Safari, it started playing adult videos at max volume. I sat there sweating and wanting to die for the remainder of the ride. Oh snap, you unlocked a memory. We were in an early 2000s computer science class in my 40-person class. I was in back row while the professor was lecturing on computer safety. Like not sharing sensitive information, and bam, adult video blasted out of this poor fella's computer speakers. Big Dell desktops, which were full volume on its little bookshelf speakers, so everyone turns immediately around and looks at him, and the professor does too. He turned it off quickly and said, "Sorry," while slumping into his chair. He was not there for the rest of the semester. Story 2. A girl graduating from college falls down repeatedly on the stage. She fell at least 3 or 4 times, and it was like something invisible was sweeping her leg out from under her. She even had a WTF expression on her face. Thank you for reminding me. This happened to me once on a first date in a restaurant. The floor was very slippery, and I was in high heels. The first fall was my ankle giving away. I stood up and then it happened again, so I clung to a guy that was having dinner with his girlfriend to break my fall. He helped me up by my elbow, and then I fell again just before reaching the toilets. I was completely sober, and on the way back to my table I was taking the tiniest, slowest steps imaginable. Since we're sharing stories, my most embarrassing slip and fall was at Pier 1 Imports in the front foyer area. There was a spiral staircase that went to the 2nd floor. I'm descending these stairs, and at the very top, I slip. I do one of those barely controlled falls where your body is falling and your legs are just frantically pinwheeling to stay upright. Arms flailing, feet clomping loudly and out of control. I do this fall/run down the entire flight of stairs, just gaining momentum the whole way down, until I hit the 1st floor. My feet can't stay under me when I hit the level ground, and I pitch forward onto my belly and slide across the entryway. The contents of my purse spill and fan out, and slide with me. I stop when I hit a display table. Luckily, I didn't take it down. Several people rushed to me like, "Sweet Jesus, are you okay?" I'm actually bleeding from 2 different minor wounds, but I just try to gather my things up as quickly as possible. I probably could have sued, but I just wanted to leave as soon as possible. I never went back to that store ever again. I hope she wasn't experiencing a neurological symptom. That was how one of my buddies found out he had ALS. He just started falling down all of a sudden. It was literally starting out of nowhere, and he was walking down the street. He had to have someone come and get him because he couldn't make it back to the house any later and went to the hospital. This is weirdly both related and unrelated. My graduating class was strictly lectured to not move, bend down, or do anything during the principal's speech. Some jerk let a mouse go that they had bought at a pet store, under the feet of all the other students. Kids were lifting their feet and stomping, and I panicked and dove onto the floor under some chairs to put my hands over the mouse quickly before someone stepped on it. The girl next to me had fainted briefly earlier. while we were standing, and I grabbed her to help her stand up. So everybody thought it was contagious and had done the same. I had to get back up into my chair and hide the mouse in my hands because I was afraid I would get in trouble. Someone had a film box that I was able to fit the mouse into. It was little. However, I was worried it would suffocate, so I had to keep one end open with my hand loosely kept over it. Also, it may have peed all over my hands as I was picking it up. It definitely did a lot. For some reason, at this stage, I still thought I needed to hide that I had this mouse because I was afraid someone would take it from me and I didn't know what would happen to it. By this time, I had vowed to the mouse that I would protect her. So I managed to move the film box from one hand to the other, as I was both shaking the hand of the principal and accepting my diploma with pee-covered hands. I was shaking with nerves the entire time. By the way, I am not this timid anymore. I got the mouse a sister and kept them for the next couple of years until they passed away of mouse old age. I had lots of other pets at the time, so it wasn't a hardship at all, but I still look back at this and think it's so funny because I'm the biggest rule follower, and to break a rule like that at the time so easily was such a strange thing for me. It taught me at a time when I was so focused on being good and perfect in everyone else's eyes that I had limits and things that I would stand up for, without even thinking. If I was confronted with them, talk about realizing you have a superpower. It was a big lesson for me. Story 3 was going down an escalator at the mall in Georgia when the 90-something-year-old guy in front of me very suddenly crapped his pants. We were about 500 feet from the bathroom and he was wearing shorts. I felt so bad for him. My dad gave him his hoodie to wrap around his waist. I was very proud of my dad at that moment. What's up with people in Georgia? LMAO. I live here and so many old people crap themselves around me and it's never happened anywhere else I've lived. I work in a bank and one time this lady made a weird face and I realized that she had crapped herself after smelling it halfway through our interaction. It got on the floor. Someone else had crapped in one of the offices and it was all over one of the nice chairs in my coworker's office. We had to throw it away. Another time, a guy got stabbed in our branch downtown, came in to do a check deposit, and trailed in blood all over the place. We offered to call an ambulance, but he said he was taking an Uber and that he didn't want to pay for an ambulance. Can't say I blame him too much. Atlanta is just something else. Oh god, that reminds me of a place I used to work at. It was early morning at the office and the managers wanted everyone to get together and do stretches before the morning meeting. The guy in front of me was easily 80 years old and he bent over to do a toe touch. He coughed while he was bent over and the next thing you know, a wet brown spot appeared on the seat of his pants, and it just grew and went down the length of his leg. He was totally oblivious and just kept on trucking. Someone finally stepped in and pulled him aside to tell him what was up. I was on a cruise ship, sunbathing on the sun deck when this poor old man with a walking stick hobbled past as fast as he could, one hand holding the back of his shorts and a trail of poop falling out as he went. Honestly, smelt it before I even realized what was going on. Felt so bad for him. The staff annoyed me as after we told them what happened and pointed out the trail of poop, they sort of stood around unsure what to do before eventually disappearing for about 15 minutes, leaving the space unmanned. At that time, a small group of us were trying in vain to warn people not to walk through it, but we didn't manage to get them all. About 3 people ended up walking through it, and 1 was barefoot. Staff eventually came back armed with PPE and cleaning supplies, but the damage was done. Hope that old fella was doing okay. Oh god, once I was at the mall and my dad needed to use the toilet, and I didn't. See, he went, and I waited. The toilets were at the end of a long corridor of the main mall, so I just waited at the mall end. While I'm waiting, someone pukes on the floor outside the toilets. Nice. They go tell someone, presumably. Meanwhile, a sweet old lady is tottering down the corridor for ages and no one realizes she hasn't seen the puke. And she walks straight through it, slips and falls on her backside in it. It was like seeing a car crash in slow motion. I was at a Chinese buffet like 20 years ago for lunch. We were sitting in a booth, chowing down on some crab legs when this dude who was also like 90 was making a beeline for the bathroom. I could hear him poop himself as he walked by us. Luckily, he was only maybe 40 feet away from the bathroom and already had quite a bit of momentum. I also assumed he was probably preparing for it, what with not being only 90, but also being at an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet. Story 4. A colleague of mine put in his 2 weeks. For context, he's a fairly attractive man. Well, this woman from HR, of all places, comes by his cubicle to, wish him well, I guess. Anyway, she basically gives him a lap dance right there in front of the whole office. I need to know everything about this. How old was she? What did she look like? For some reason, I picture a middle-aged divorcee grinding on Henry Cavill's stunt double to no music, just biting that bottom lip and making heavy eye contact thinking she's a seductress, all the while the guy's face is red and he's avoiding her eyes but pleading with everyone else for an intervention. Am I close? If not, please correct me so I can be a happy woman knowing more about this. Story 5. Was at a dinner party when my friend's mother-in-law asked another one of our friends when her baby was due. She wasn't pregnant. Anyway, mother-in-law should have simply apologized, but instead doubled down with something to the effect of, "It sure looks like you're pregnant." I was holding my newborn baby when a random lady pointed at my midsection bump and said, "Wow, another one? When are you due?" I had to awkwardly say, no, this is still just fatness from this baby." Points at the newborn. This happened to me once. It was about a year after having my daughter and I was having trouble losing the baby weight. An older lady coworker asked me when I was due and I said I wasn't pregnant. She says, "Oh, you were always so thin. I just assumed." I was annoyed by her rudeness, so I snarkily replied, "No, just fat, but thanks for noticing," and walked away. Walked back to my desk, and she followed me trying to explain again why she thought I was pregnant. I lost my cool by then and told her what a tactless piece of crap she was and to just stop talking unless it was to apologize for being so inconsiderate and rude. She was completely deflated, and I'm sure to this day she has never asked anyone when they're due again. No regrets. She absolutely deserved it. Had a boss who did something similar. Asked a customer, "So, when are you due?" And she looked him straight in the face and said, "I'm not pregnant, I'm just fat." He sputtered and apologized, and he would disappear like a ninja whenever she came back in. Fast forward several years, and I was working with this attorney for a few months who was obviously pregnant, but since the topic had never been brought up by her or anyone else, I said nothing. Turns out she didn't even realize she was pregnant until about 7 months in, and finally started to take her weird health issues seriously. I literally knew she was pregnant before she did. She was also very small and thin, so it was even more obvious. I think she was just under so much stress from being a mid-level attorney trying to follow the partner track that she just ignored her own health. The baby turned out fine. I used to have people ask me when I was 17 if I was pregnant. I had a thin frame and a normal body weight. I'm 5'8" and was 150 pounds, but my stomach wasn't perfectly flat, which paired with poor posture probably made me look like I could maybe have been 3 months pregnant. But honestly, I don't really think I looked pregnant. Anyway, a girl at school shouted at me one day, "You pregnant?" I said no. Then she just looked confused, almost pissed and with a big attitude, and she walked away. At my job at the time, Starbucks, a nice lady in the drive-thru asked me how far along I was. I said, "Excuse me?" She immediately looked very embarrassed and said she was sorry. At church, I had told this lady I wasn't there the week before because of my time of month and severe cramps. She looked me straight in the face and says, "I thought you were pregnant." I said, "No, I'm not." She didn't seem embarrassed one bit. I never liked her and thought she was weird. About 9 months later, I had put on about 30 pounds due to a side effect from a drug and was desperately trying to lose the weight. I was in a waiting room at Duke Hospital while my dad was in surgery. A pretty full waiting room. This lady yells across the room while looking straight at me, "You pregnant?" I was instantly transported back in time to my high school days, LOL. She literally sounded just like the girl in high school. I said, "No, I'm just fat," or something like that. She said, "Oh." I could literally feel the cringe of everyone else in the waiting room. Around the same time, I was doing freelance graphic design. I was helping a longtime client of mine with a new restaurant. The lady working in the bakery/dessert area was always friendly to me, although she was a bit odd. One day, she was preparing baby shower cupcakes and she looked at me and said, "When are we going to be able to make some for you?" I said, "What?" Then my client looks at her and says, "She's not pregnant." The lady just looked puzzled and slightly ashamed. Yes, these are all real stories, forever embedded into my memory. I can't remember what I ate last night, but I will surely always remember these fun times. In my old job, I was working with teenage kids in care, etc., helping them find work, courses, and prepare for life, etc. This kid came in for induction with his support worker lady, who was small, petite, and slim except for an obvious egg-shaped bump in her tummy. At some point, I asked her, "How long have you got left?" She gave me a funny look and said, I'm not pregnant," and laughed. I laughed nervously and quickly changed the subject back to the kid's course. The room became very hot and awkward after that. The kid went to the toilet and she suddenly blurted out, "I'm sorry, yes I am pregnant, but I haven't told the kid yet because when I go on mat leave, I won't be his support worker anymore and I don't want to upset him with that news yet." That day, I vowed never to mention a woman's body unless she brings it up first, and I still live by that rule. Story 6. I was ringing a girl and her BF up, and she was a few dollars short on her transaction. BF then got in my face and insisted her Red Bulls were buy one get one. It is true that they were buy one get one, but the promo had ended months earlier. This man proceeds to yell and scream at me for 5 minutes about how she deserves these drinks and how dare I yada yada. This whole time his girlfriend was trying to disappear into the chip display like Homer sliding into that bush, just dying of embarrassment. Eventually, after I threatened to trespass him, he gave me the biggest eye roll I have ever received and spat on the floor and told his girlfriend, "Let's get out of here." This F slur clearly gets off on denying beautiful women what they need. His exact words. I had a similar-ish experience. My ex-best friend and her boyfriend all went out together. Historically, boyfriend guy had a weird streak of being a little bit of a hothead and being a magnet for a fight, somehow, despite being a fairly slight person. We went to a nice show, then to a cute bar that we were all excited by. It was an old school institution of a bar with strict rules and no nonsense about moving chairs or tables around and signs everywhere. We see there's no foretop and I decided we'll wait it out until something emerges. Boyfriend goes to grab a chair and decides to move it anyway despite the signs. The bartender immediately appears and firmly says, "Hey, you guys can't move those." At this point, I understand we're caught and was about to say, "Hey, sorry about that, we're just actually waiting." But boyfriend just blows the hell up, like all the way to 11 in a single second. "Fine!" he explodes, spitting almost in the bartender's face, who's huge. The bartender shoots his arm out, screaming, "Get the hell out of here before I mess you up, ginger boy." His girlfriend and my SO walk up with drinks just at that instant, and we immediately leave. Up till this point, we were having a very cool, romantic, fun adult group date. Very fun ways. Classy, and in one instant got completely clowned because this guy decided to go nuclear over a freaking chair. This reminds me of the time my friends and I, all brown, were walking in the classy bars area of the city when this random white man stopped right in the middle of our pathway, bowed, and said, "Namaste." One of my friends loudly says, "We're not Indian, bro," as we walk right past him. He was accompanied by a black woman who was standing to the side with her mouth open, clearly uncomfortable. Not sure if that was his girlfriend or just a coworker, appeared to be after-work drinks, but if that was his date for the night, she clearly would not be having a follow-up one with him. A similar thing happened to me when I was a teenager working at an ice cream store. I was working with the owner's daughter, also a teenage girl, and a grown man and his girlfriend came in. I'd seen him, but never his girlfriend. He wanted his free punch card ice cream. He had a lot of different punch cards that should tally up to a free ice cream, except that each store is a franchise, so you can't just use punch cards from another store. And some of them were from another store. When the owner's daughter explained this to him, he flipped out so badly that I came over and stood with my hand on her shoulder. Ultimately, he threw all the cards in the air and proclaimed how many times he had obviously been there, then stormed out. I think he was just feeling defensive, and I have secondhand embarrassment for him to this day. When I was 8 to 10 years old, my sister and I were on a trip with my mom. Hampton Inn either lost or never had her reservation, and the entire hotel was filled due to a wedding. My mom got irate and started screaming at the poor front desk guy who legitimately couldn't do anything to help her and had no record of her reservation. This was the early 2000s. She did it over the phone and her confirmation number didn't exist. After 5 minutes, she called him the F word and we had to leave when the manager told her he would call the police. It's been 25 years and I'm still mortified that it happened. My sister and I apologized, but I've never felt such shame for something I didn't do. Story 7. I'm sure everyone felt this for me. I walked into work one day and everyone was standing around and I was like, "What happened?" Someone die? Yep, the guy I worked with took his life. Posted this recently in another thread, but there was a time when I didn't know what a vigil was, so when a large walking group at our university dorm said that they were walking to an on-campus vigil, I loudly said, "Have fun!" That was the last time I made an assumption about what a word I didn't know meant. Me and my friends went out for a drink after my best friend's dad's funeral. We all loved the man. At the end of the day, I meant to tell my friend that I was glad that I could be there that day, and that I thought that it was good for him and all of us to get out and reminisce together. What I said with a few drinks in me was, "Today was a good day." I immediately blanched and my friend just gave me crap. Though he knows I'm just a fool sometimes. Ha! Sadly, a friend and neighbor passed away from diabetes complications. His wake was on Super Bowl Sunday. His young adult daughter was a daddy's girl and was really shaken up and grief-stricken. I gave her a hug and said, "Leave it to your dad to get us all together on Super Bowl Sunday." OMG, she and her two brothers laughed. I guess my husband had some secondhand embarrassment. I pointed out they laughed. The coworker was chatting to our boss about how she was basically just starving to death now because they couldn't do anything else for her. Damn, that's awful for your poor pet. I say, "Aw man, they can't just put her down?" He whips his head around and says, "My grandma?" He seemed so nonchalant and my mind went to dog. I never apologized so much. Not nearly as bad, but at a previous job, one of the women that worked there got fired. She sat in the conference room for over an hour just crying hysterically, which was obviously throughout the whole office. She eventually emerges from the room and goes around to say her goodbyes. She's still very sullen, but has at least stopped crying. She eventually gets to another coworker to say her goodbyes, and apparently this coworker was oblivious to what recently transpired. When the fired woman said, "Today was my last day," the other coworker replied, "Oh, congrats! Where are you going?" They fumbled through a little more back and forth before I intervened to end it. That was without a doubt the most awkward thing I ever witnessed at work. Had a regular at my first job who was always with his wife. They came in 3 to 5 times a week. Always together, just talking and sharing a drink for hours. One day, years later at my third job, I saw him with a girl who was clearly his daughter. I walked over and jokingly said, "Are you cheating on Rosie with this young lady?" or something similar. I don't know. Wasn't funny, just talking. He said, "Rosie passed away last Wednesday." I felt my soul leave my body. I barely knew them, but when he started telling me about the upcoming wake, I felt obligated to go by that point. Story 8. I was selling some kettlebells on the Facebook Marketplace and a woman in her early 40s bought them. She came in to pick them up, and as I handed them over to her, she obviously wasn't expecting them to be as heavy as they were, and she suddenly strained to counter the weight. She ripped the most extreme of farts you have ever heard. It was gargantuan. I was shocked, but also proud. I'm usually pretty good at making light of any situation, but I found myself speechless for the first time in my life. If I could, I would have returned, serve. But even on my best day, I don't believe I could create such a symphony. We both kind of stared into each other's eyes, and she said, "Well," and turned around and walked off. I think about her often. I briefly worked for a super aggressive woman divorce lawyer. She was ruthless. One day she just farted in her office while I was there with her. So matter-of-factly. To this day, I'm not sure if it was an accident or a power move to assert dominance. My first girlfriend's dad was a self-made multi-millionaire from Hong Kong. He flew from Hong Kong to visit her in New York once. I remember sitting at her apartment table, him having changed into a silk robe and slippers after his long flight, and lighting up cigarettes in her very non-smoking apartment. Just ripping fart after fart. Wet ones, slapping ones, squeaky ones. He did not give a crap and just proceeded to fire them off as we discussed dinner plans and accommodating his schedule for the week. I sold an air conditioner online. He came to pick it up. I had it all set to test, then toss into the original packaging, which I did and he paid. We had to do this outside my apartment in the hallway where we could plug it in. I offered to help carry it with him to the car, as I would say it was about a 1.5 person carry. 2 people probably should carry it. OSHA is watching. This guy is like, "Nah, I got it." I picked it up and put it on his shoulder. I was kind of impressed, but I think he overdid it. He took off down the apartment hall quite quickly. I was following him as there were 2 doors between him and the outside. Halfway down the hallway is a fire door. It was open, but he didn't notice it at all. With the AC unit on his shoulder, he was too tall. I noticed at the last second and yelled out, but it was too late. He went full steam into this thing. The dude was lucky he didn't fall with the AC unit on his face, but he somehow twisted around and I just got there to help him save it. The AC unit somehow didn't hit the ground, but the thunderclap that came out of that man's ass cheeks as he strained to hold that box. Unspoken, we each grabbed a side of that box and we hurried it out of the building. Still silent, he loaded it up and was off before I could ask if he was okay. I walked to the convenience store to give the hall some time to air out. I hadn't smelled it yet and didn't want to. I'm a regular here, so as I walked in, the clerk greeted me and asked me what was up. I said that I was just out for a walk as some guy let the biggest fart I have ever heard go in the hallway of my apartment, and I wasn't ready to go home yet. He laughed, and as I turned to go to the back of the store to get a drink, I turned to see that the farter had beat me here and was now quickly making their way to the exit. Story 9. That time my old roommate told a table full of his family that AIDS and cancer are the same thing. Just after talking about how much he's been learning from his night classes. Those classes were being paid for by his parents, and spoiler alert, he wasn't attending any classes. They realized it by the time dinner was over. My friend was dating a compulsive liar who was in med school and thought blue veins pump blood away from the heart. We were like, the A in artery means away, according to 5th grade health, and the blood isn't blue. Just the diagrams. He couldn't get away from us fast enough because his lie empire was crumbling. I've been work from home at my company for 13 years now. I have always used a wireless headset because I am on a ton of calls all day and like to pace when I think. Once and only once have I forgotten to mute when going to the restroom in the middle of a meeting. Luckily for me, the only other people on the call were my wife and my best friend of over 20 years. We all work together. Now I quintuple check that I'm muted before pissing or flushing. Story 10. I was a server at an American restaurant and a family came in, and the mother was berating everyone. She yelled at the server and complained about the food not being the right temperature, and then she thought it was too salty, etc. She really had it in for the 17-year-old server. He was fine, but the customer wanted to pick at someone. Her husband and teenage children look embarrassed. She had been like this before. There was a sign on the door that said we reserved the right to refuse service to anyone, and management decided that this lady shouldn't eat with us again. So the manager went over and comped the meals and told them to leave and not come back. The woman was upset and left mean feedback. In response to the feedback, a regular posted a picture of the woman and her family. She quickly took down her bad feedback. She deserved the public upbringing, but I was embarrassed for her family. As someone who had the wonderful experience of growing up with such a mom, I feel that family's pain. If you say something, it gets worse. If you say nothing, they keep going. If you walk away, you're a traitor, and how dare you not have my back? And if that wasn't bad enough, my mom was blessed with vocal cords that would make a howler monkey sound timid. So apart from the poor waiters/clerks and my family, literally everyone within a 100-meter radius would get to enjoy her latest expression of dissatisfaction. She once went nuclear on maybe a 20-year-old ticket clerk at a museum because the signage isn't clear enough. And people wonder why I hate movies that have any secondhand embarrassment in them. At this point, I really wonder why these people don't just make their own food exactly how they like it and eat it at home. Because it's not about the food. People who are terrible have to find someone to go after because it displaces the terrible feelings they momentarily feel inside. It's why these are things that happen primarily at chain restaurants. They are imbued with the knowledge that it's not coming out of the manager's pocket when the meal gets completed. The poor person taking the order is just cannon fodder. Chain restaurants would rather comp a $100 check that costs more than $6 in ingredients than not have a bad review. Story 11. I went to an open house and there was this older realtor helping the listing agent. He was excitedly walking around this empty house talking about features while looking back at my husband and me, and he ran headfirst into a chandelier that would be positioned over a dining room table had one been there. It happened so quickly we couldn't even warn him. He got tangled in it and ripped it down as he fell face first to the ground, cutting himself up badly in the process. We both still cringe thinking about it. We saw him out at the supermarket recently and both whispered, "Oh no." I've been reading the responses on this thread for 20 minutes now, and this is the most embarrassing one I've read yet. I feel like everything else. The embarrassing things happen, and then the situation ends. And at least one of the parties just walks away in shame or embarrassment. But with this one, neither party can leave. The realtor still has to do the open house, all cut up and bleeding while dealing with getting rid of the broken-ass chandelier and a giant hole in the ceiling. and OP has to at least stay and make sure the guy's okay, and can't really leave because after the guy messed himself up, they have to at least pretend they're still interested in the house. Otherwise, he messed himself up for nothing, so now they've both got to continue with this open house that clearly neither of them wants or should be having. This is spot on. We had to help him get untangled from the chandelier. One of the loops was caught behind his ear. And he was saying, "I'm fine, we'd fix that before you'd move in, obviously," while gesturing to the hole in the ceiling. On top of it, it was a public open house, so people just kept pouring into the house while this man was lying on the floor bleeding, while the other realtors scrambled trying to pick up bits of glass and chandelier beads. And what the fuck were we supposed to do? Just slither away? This guy was talking to us when he smacked into the thing, so we just stood there for an unnaturally long time until finally I faked a phone call and we left. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.